Hey folks, good evening. Where are you guys from? I would like to know that firstly. A little bit about me. I'm a Flutter developer, mobile developer based in Navi Mumbai, Maharashtra. I have a rough experience of about like 5.5 years of mobile app development, and out of which purely I've been using Flutter for the past 1.5 years. And yeah, that is about me. I've if you guys are let me just open the chat there. Yes. So if you guys are or girls are from a development background, just put one in the chat if for me to understand what my audience is like. Yes. Yeah. Hey Jen. So I'll be talking mostly about Flutter today. I'll be talking about how do you guys uh, start your journey as a mobile developer. As I've been a self-taught developer as well. I've been working for since my college years. Excuse me. I've been working since my second year professionally, and there's a lot to it. But I would like to summarize all of that in a small introductory session for you guys. Uh, so yeah, that would be what today's session of this session would be about. Uh, so there are like one, two, three, four, five, 6 people about great. That is a very nice response. Yeah. So can we start like Jay? If you can go to the next slide. Right. So let's talk about Flutter first. And yeah, if there's any questions you guys have about Flutter, you can start asking them whenever a relevant topic comes in the session, or you can just type them in the chat and I'll answer them. So yeah. So what is actually Flutter? So for me, if I would have to explain this to someone who's just starting up or someone who has uh, no relation with the development domain or the IT domain per se, I would say it is like a small toolbox which helps you to throw on some tools, ready to use tools into your onto your working site, and they are already half baked, and you can do some modifications to it to create your own plethora of applications or various other like use cases. So but let's be a bit more specific and not just go uh, like haywire, and let's be a little more specific of what Flutter is actually. Can we go to the next slide please? Right. So as they say, Flutter is actually a UI toolkit created by Google, and it is used to make softwares across multiple platforms such as Fuchsia, Google Chrome, Android, iOS. It also caters to web and as well as Linux and desktop applications. So that is what a Flutter is, and that cute guy to the right is called Tash, and he's my favorite because uh, uh, he's the representative of what Flutter is. He is the mascot for Flutter. But yeah, coming back to what Flutter is for a budding developer or someone who's trying to get into the development domain, it will. So when I was back in the college and when I was just trying to break through in the software development scene, we used to go through a lot of templates, a lot of ready half-baked code bases. We used to grind over the code can and all those sites to get like a partially baked, ready to use UI kit or a somewhat well cooked design system. But however, like back in the day, they were kind of useful for a particular use case only, and they were not very dynamic in nature. So the all these issues are actually tackled in Flutter, and as it is, it has a very firstly it has a very big community, a very nice community who actually uh, participate in the roadmap or the future development of Flutter. So you could say this is being designed on the go by the users. And yeah, so I see someone asked, is Flutter free to use? Right. So Flutter is actually an open source framework. So anyone can use it. It's totally free. And other than that, as it's an open source project, as it's an open source initiative, you can actually participate in the development of the same. Right? Please go to the next slide. Yeah. Hmm. The very first point itself. So yeah, it is open source and free. My preferences. So these are my preferences why I use Flutter, and these are written in not any specific order. They are just there because I found them in those order. So out of my 5 years career, like this is from my personal experience, I had observed that uh, the industry had started demanding a lot of animations and lot of interactions in the name of a good user experience. And over the time period, designers were given the toolkit, were given the softwares and the tool to design better experiences. However, as developers, we lacked that. Uh, one reason being is because if you're someone very new to the scene, you wouldn't know what tools are there or what how should you go in a particular path, right? But Flutter over here, when you want to create like very expressive or very interactive user interface, it helps you create those animations and those interactions very easily. It has very less boilerplate code. So what by the boilerplate code is a bunch of code you write for literally all the applications, and there's only like a bunch of differences in those variants. So Flutter avoids that, and it helps you by taking care of that boilerplate, and you just need to focus on what animations you want to make. Hmm. Other than that, it's very fast performance. Um, so let's say like native applications have their own benefits that they are able to access resources very easily, and like native applications have that virtue on their own, right? So as Flutter enters the market of hybrid applications and native applications, it competes to the native one and not the hybrid applications like React Native or maybe Cordova and those segments, because it directly interacts with the engine itself. I mean, the Flutter SDK interacts with the native engine in such a way that it results in better performance. Of course, like cross-platform development, as I said earlier, and then this other key point is that it has a very small code base. I'll get to that later on in the session, but the code base for Flutter is very small. It has a like if someone is using a specific sort of development, like an MVC model or something like that sorts. So we know that you need to create models and views and controllers and all those things, but when using Flutter, there is a lot of code base that you need not write. That is how the semantics are of Dart. Um, hmm. Yeah, guys, please let me know if I'm going too fast, as this is something which I'm very excited about. So sometimes I just take a train of thought and go in that direction. So yeah, if someone can let me know if the pace is all right for you guys. Yeah. So I was talking about the key benefits again over here. Um, right. So I'll come back to this point later on that how you can create expressive user interfaces. Uh, there's a lot that's a entirely different topic altogether, where you can have. Uh, I if I would have to recommend this to someone, this for designing purposes, I would highly recommend that all designers just tap into this subject of Flutter development, because it is very easy to get onboarded, and this idea of developing expressive user interfaces is very much for a person who likes to demo with, I mean, play with interfaces and code at the same time. The pace is good. Yeah, thanks, man. All right. And then again, for the folks who are already there in the development domain and who are already doing a lot of web development, who are already doing a lot of mobile development, for them, this programming language Dart is kind of made for you guys because it has a lot of semantics and a lot of patterns that are used in web development and the mobile development at the same place, and only the best practices are onboarded and not the bad ones like JavaScript and the how it handles this class and all that. So if someone uses JavaScript, boom, I just dropped a bomb on you guys. Popular apps that use Flutter. Yes, you are here at the. I mean, this slide is for you. I'm really happy that someone called that out. And yeah, let's answer this question at first. So, can you name some popular apps that use Flutter? So, this slide can actually answer that. How a lot of how a lot of big players in the market, such as BMW, Dream 11, someone from India, uh, Alibaba Group, and Google. These guys are using Flutter at their front, very big applications that they have. One of the testimonial that I'm showing here is of Igor Borges, who is a very influential and a very smart personality. I find that person works at Nubank, and Nubank again is like a software based in they have their branches all over the world. It's like an international bank. So these guys use Flutter for their the latest app that they have brought into the market. And his testimonial is as follows: they had everything out of the box, and great documentation, community support, and tooling was great. So yeah, those are my key points as well. That why you should start using Flutter. That was my main reason to pinpoint to you guys that an industry giant like Nubank and Google and Sonos and Imar, these guys are using Flutter only because of these three things. I mean, there are like a lot of things that you can go on, such as if you have like already hired a couple of web devs and a couple of mobile devs, and you want to cut short on your employee fees that you're putting into your company. So you would rather than hiring new set of iOS developers or uh, Android developers, you would actually promote your web devs maybe to just get into Flutter and then help them help you guys make better apps. So that is what Flutter is doing right now. Other than that, one of so I am also consulting at Kotak, where Kotak Securities is currently using their is making their current app, the latest one, Kotak KSEC Neo, using Flutter, and the technology stack is basically I mean, the Flutter was basically chosen because a lot of existing features were very laggy, and then the new features they wanted to implement were very demanding, and Flutter handles performance very easily. So if a fintech company such as Kotak Securities can like put its back, one of the oldest Indian mutual funds company can put its back on Flutter, then I mean, why am even I here? Uh, which one is better between Flutter and React Native? This is a very controversial question you're asking over there. But as like I'm a fanboy and a very frequent user of Flutter, I would recommend y'all hopping onto Flutter. There are Flutter like, but yeah, this question is kind of subjective in what case you're thinking of. If your thought is only about the current market of like the Indian job market, what should you go for Flutter or React Native? Currently, if you can see, it's the React Native is kind of doing better in the Indian market, but Like this pandemic has shown us that you can work from anywhere and be hired by anyone throughout the world. So globally, as Flutter is doing much more better, and a lot of big companies are adapting to Flutter, I would definitely ask you to lean. But it's very subjective. It all boils down to what works with you. The Kotak being one of them. Yeah, yeah, right. A lot of apps already. Well, this is not a very new framework. Uh, this framework was is already there for the past 2.5 years, roughly. Uh, there was a very uh, big event recently by Flutter where they had made a lot of changes and introduced a lot of things. So this is fairly new, you could say, in the market. Yeah. So up till now, I was all talking about what is Flutter, how do you do Flutter, what who uses Flutter, and all those kind of things. Let's talk a little bit more about how you can be a developer. Firstly, how is this domain for you? If you are a designer, should you be a developer? And yeah, let's tackle those questions. Again, let's big shout out to Dash over there in the corner representing Flutter. Let's go to the next slide there. Yeah. So these are my devs commandments, or 10 commandments, you could say. These are the ethics you need to think about that goes on in the market, and if you can work around these, we can surely recommend you to be a developer. But like the current idea of being a developer is all about कि you there's a this person who sits in front of computer, कट 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 करके ऐसा टाइप करता है, and कोड बन जाता है, and then something, there's some output somewhere, and that's all, that's the job. But there's a lot of thing that goes behind the uh, IDE, and there's a lot of things that you're supposed to do when you're making an application, and not just simply following orders of your senior, of your manager, of your client. So yeah, so these are my devs commandments, which I'll go through first, and then we can talk about the other things that happen. So the first one, folks, they are the lords and ladies, thy end users, thou shalt not have any priority before them. So if there's any Jew folks or any from Orthodox Church, I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to make any joke here. It's just a representation of what something the Flutter is something, or development is something very close to me. So we are trying to represent how you can be very disciplined and very focused on your work, just like any faith works, I guess. So yeah, they are the lords and ladies, thy end users, thou shalt not have any priority before them. So this commandment basically forbids you to reprioritize your end users, and they you should never reprioritize them, and never let them fall off from your priority list. Uh, while you're designing or developing an app. This is basically the very first ethics that you should follow, because whenever you get hired, or whenever you do a project, there's a saying that your clients are always right, or maybe the documentation is always right, or maybe the requirements are always right, or maybe the market is always right. So collectively, all of them are wrong, because the market is directed by a lot of big giants and companies and users. The document is directed by some developer somewhere, or some designer somewhere. The requirements are driven by clients, but the person who will be using your application lies in the very far of this chain, which is your end user, and they are always right. Always have the highest priority, because they are someone who will be actually using your application, not your clients, not the market, not anyone else. So you should always have them highly prioritized whenever you are whenever you are making a project. The second one, as they say, thou shalt not make an experience to put your end users in vain. uh, how long have you been using? Okay, my bad. I'll come to that question, Kavya, but let me talk about these in a couple of minutes. So developers are required to honor user experience, and by that what I mean is the entire journey of a user, from clicking to your app or even before installing to the app. The entire journey of you as a developer or maybe later on as a project manager, it should be that if you guys had followed Shubhang's Shubhang's session earlier on, he had talked about how a brand has a personality, right? So you bring that personality from the brand to your application, and that personality over there needs to be such that it is reflected throughout the journey of the application, from entering as well as uh, like to the whatever the goal of the application is. So that entire journey needs to be very seamless, a lot of less clicks, very user friendly, as I say. And as a developer, your priority should be that your application is very user friendly, irrespective if you have to run an extra mile or do some extra research work or push your client to do that work even if they are denying, because this is your highest uh, priority as a developer after your end users, of course. Huh. The third one, as I say, is remember to keep holy the dry run. So dry run is a concept which I have kind of named it dry run. I don't know if this is if everyone does this, but dry run is something basically you do uh, prior to your UAT demo day, showcasing or handover. So in dry runs, what you do is you have your application tested by yourself or your team. You go through the code, you do a code review, because while you're developing an application or a particular feature, your focus is basically कि ये चल जाए, ये execute हो जाए, the output should be there, the throughput should be there, and sometimes you miss out on a lot of things in the code. There is some extra code, there's some unnecessary code. Sometimes it's not really optimized. So those things are actually called off in these dry runs, which I do with the team and sometimes on my own. And during these dry run and code review, a lot of reworks may happen, but please don't shy away to do those reworks, because again, end user is your priority and you don't want to submit a very not so optimized application to them, right? Okay. So the fourth one, as I say, is honor thy milestones. Now this is something for a very small to medium and large size projects, not for like a small or very micro level projects. So milestones are basically the set of deliverables that you plan for your client, and or maybe just for yourself or the team maybe. It actually depends on how you work. So these milestones are, sometimes you may path away from the milestones. Probably it has a delivery date of the 17th, and on the 18th you're trying to deliver it. So a couple of times it's kind of okay because it's understandable. In the end, it's humans who are developing, and there can be a human error. But having something to be committed on 17th and delivering it on the 25th is actually not really honoring your milestones. I'm mentioning this again and again is because this actually helps you maintain a good relation with your client, with your team, and honoring milestones go a long way for bringing in future prospects. So yeah, always honor your milestones, folks. Hmm. So yeah, the next one is comment thy code. I mean, the as you can already see the transition. What is happening here is earlier on we were just talking about our end users, and now slowly we'll be talking about what you should be doing. So commenting of code is something which I never used to do. It was a very bad habit until I started working with teams. And a lot of times my code was not understandable at all, because I tend to use small variables and the alphabets which are closer to me while I'm typing. And that in the first case itself when I shift my or submit my code for review, or I just push it on the Git, my teammates are like, "ये क्या लिखा है तूने? What is this? I know it works, but I don't know how it works." So to ensure that question doesn't or that scenario never happens, firstly, make use of variables that make sense. If there's a variable called if there's a variable which you use for incrementing a certain value in your field, so you could have it probably written as an incrementing counter or inc counter or something, rather than just typing I mean, that doesn't make sense, right? Like if you just hand over your code. I see Chinmay there giving that file. He is actually the one who faced that issue with me. So yeah, the team which I was working on, they told me how this practice can go a long way. Because when you try to run, because when you work through codes which are a year long old, and you have to just dive in into a particular feature, uh, it could result in you not understanding what is written. So apart from writing like very nice variable names, there should also be present comments for whatever logic you're implementing in a particular function, in a particular class. It is the most tedious task that you are supposed to do while you're developing, apart from testing and all that. But yeah, this goes a long way. Yeah, right. So the next one is thou shall not commit without pull. So before I try to explain that, I just want to know how many of you guys have an idea of what a Git is, or a SVN, or GitHub, Bitbucket. Have you guys heard of these words? Just put a thumbs up or like a one in the chat. Okay, while that comes, I'm unsure. Oh, okay, there is someone's watching. Anyhow, uh, if I have to explain Git or Bitbucket or one of these subversions, it's basically something which it's a tool which helps you to parallelly work with your teammates. You can push your code to the server, and parallelly you can work on same features, same applications, and whatnot. So while you're working on Git, you should always take a pull before you push. So this is the pull and push commits. These are Git terms. Uh, I think when you one of you uh, starts using GitHub, you will understand what these terms are in a proper sense. But to give you the crux of it, it would be something whenever you pull something, you're trying to fetch whatever is there on the server, and whatever discrepancies you have on your local machine or your laptop or desktop, they try to resolve that. So if there's something new on the server, on the cloud, that is brought to you on your device, and then all that new set of data that you have worked on, plus this new set of files which are fetched, all this is clubbed together and pushed to the server again. So the reason you're supposed to do this is because, uh, sorry about that. The reason you're supposed to do this is because sometimes it may happen that while you're working with your team, a common functionality or a common file is being refactored or edited by both of you guys, and that issue should be resolved on your system rather than it having on the server. So that अगर 100 जन एक ही जगह पे काम कर रहे हैं, so everyone will have that issue if you push that issue on the server. But it's always recommended to take a pull and then push your commit. It resolves that issue basically. Right. Yeah, I'm to full on matlab ekdam super pumped right now, because the next commandment is something which I is my thumb rule as an employee. So thou shall not deploy on a Friday. So if you work at some places where you do a weekly or bi-weekly checkup of your code or showcase of your project, never ever commit your code and or deploy it or hand over it or have a showcase on a Friday. That is because These showcases go for long hours, probably 2 3 hours, depending on how difficult your how complex your code is actually. And then you get reworks. So what happens is, like, in an ideal scenario, you have like a very subah 10 o'clock office, and you do a debrief on what is happening and all that, and you do your work throughout the day. And on the evening, whenever you're trying to submit your code and have a showcase, that time, like, अभी तुमको weekend है, it is human nature to log off early, probably like 5 o'clock को अगर छूटता है तो 4 o'clock को बंद होना है. So everyone wants to enjoy their weekend, right? And I'm sure you guys do want to enjoy your weekend. So after these showcases that happen in the evening, you get like a set of reworks. Maybe a bug is found, maybe कोई specific operating system में नहीं चल रहा है, like various scenarios, right? So you don't want to actually sit and spoil your weekend resolving those. So it's always recommended you have these issues tackled at the start of the week, and recommend your employer or maybe your client to have that showcase or that submission or that deployment on the very first day of the week. क्योंकि तभी तुम क्या एकदम you guys are pumped up to, okay, आज काम करेगा. Maybe that's me. But in the start of the week, you're more pumped up than you are in the end of the week, and you want that sweet weekend which was waiting for you. So yeah, like, always have your deployment not on a Friday, and any other day is fine, whatever day works with you, but never on a Friday if you want to enjoy a weekend. Or if you are someone who was someone like me, or maybe me back in the day, whose enjoyment of weekend means working, have your way, man. Right. Okay. Thou shalt not covet end users' data. This commandment is something which I made in the past few years for myself, uh, because working in across college projects and um, small scale freelancing projects, you don't understand uh, what personal data you could collect of a user. But as I started making more of a e-com kind of platform, or working in applications where user data is of the utmost importance for any interaction within the application. Uh, so in those cases, I realized that there's a lot of data, actually a lot of data that you are collecting, and if it can be exponential, you can generate exponential number of information from that processed data. uh, Basically, if I had to give you an example, a simple acceptance of your cookies can actually make you a possible target for these ad campaigns in other applications. So let's say if you're browsing something, if you're looking to purchase a wallet, or maybe some sort of fancy cup, and if you accept some certain sites ka cookie uh, pop-ups, you'll notice whenever you try to get into these Instagram या फिर Facebook, they start targeting you. These pages start targeting you, and तुमको लगेगा कि I just accepted one cookie. How do they इतना सारा कैसे हो गया? So there's a lot of thing that goes on behind, where without acknowledgement, sometimes people just simply share the data of your end user, and that is something is to be avoided. That is something called dark patterns. If you're a UI UX designer, you must be knowing what a dark patterns is. But dark patterns is something doing unethical, but in a slightly ethical way. तुम उनको बता रहे हो you're taking their data, but not completely. So this commandment actually forbids you to do that, and commands you to, or makes you obliged to always make the user acknowledge about that you are actually sharing the data to some other companies or maybe other campaign runners, and not just simply, yeah, okay, this is my set of 1 lakh users, where is my paycheck? Don't do that. And thou shalt not steal thy hard work for less. Right. Okay. So this commandment is again something which I believe a lot of us do, and the folks that don't do this, I want to understand what is wrong with you guys. Uh, so what this commandment basically means is you shall not shy away from asking the right price uh, for your hard work, because in the Indian market or maybe these other online platforms, there's this idea that whatever you put out in as a request for a developer or an agency in the global market, that can be reduced by 30% by a single uh, small agency from India, or maybe a couple of developers can do that for very less amount. So this idea is kind of diminishing the value or the hard work someone does. And this is basically an idea of always get paid for your worth. Never sell yourself low for something just because you want to get some money. If you want to have that project in your portfolio, that's a different story altogether. But every now and then you should ensure that you are selling yourself for your worth. That's what this commandment means. uh, mm, yeah, and the very last one is, thou shalt not covet thy client's budget. This is the opposite of what I explained earlier on, which is basically you should never try to oversell your client. If they have a certain budget, and they come and key, okay, I have this is my number and this is what I want. You should never be like, and if you know ki, ha, this is worth your efforts, your team's efforts, you should never over. I mean, like, put your efforts. If the task is of something like 100 rupees, and the person comes in and says, "ये इसका कितना होगा भाई?" You should never go and say, "इसका तो 10,000 होगा sir." That, because that again not only diminishes the community's value, but also puts a bad name on us developers or maybe us agency runners. So yeah, these are the 10 ethical things you should keep in mind while you're a developer. I'm sorry, this session or this slide took a lot of time, but this is something which is never explained to us when we are in college and we don't know how should we get into the development scene as an independent developer. So there are a couple of questions about resources of learning Flutter development and state management. Yeah, that's a very nice question. So these I'll be talking on in the further slides. So oh, you were right on time, whoever asked that question about state management, because now I'll start sharing the learning path, which you guys need to follow. If you're a beginner, so this session was mainly targeted to the very new audiences or very new developers who will be beginning Flutter development. However, I've made a certain learning path and created a bunch of resources that will be shared with you guys for experts and senior level developers. So let's go to the next slide and talk about it. I'll just take a break for 1 minute. I've been speaking a lot. Again, we see the dash over here, our favorite mascot. Right. So I've broken down this stream in three different pathways, or you could say three different staircases that you need to climb before you reach your expert level of Flutter development. So initially, you need to understand how Dart works, what are widgets, and what UI and a backend technology works like. Uh, so Dart is basically the language that Flutter uses. We get into a very nice deep dive over here. Let's just take an overview of the other two things that you need to tackle, which is the senior and expert level. So when once you get a good grasp of how Dart works, what widgets are, and your favorite UI design system and your favorite backend technology, you need to start understanding of how things will be interacting, how your app will be interacting with the server. You need to understand how your apps will be interacting within itself, and sometimes you need to also create very advanced or very intricate designs in your applications. So in that cases, you need to understand what streams are. So let's take this one by one. So if I need to boil down what streams are for you guys, it could be the understanding. It's a way Flutter developers use to communicate within the application, also to do some network transactions. So you can streams are basically your asynchronous calls you want to make and fetch some data, and also while that is happening, you want to do some sort of lazy loading. So you use streams for that. There are a lot of different ways you can make a stream. Using block patterns, you can simply use builders or maybe providers. So there are different architecture types you can use depending on your size of the project and to understand the concept. But in a nutshell, streams help you begin interactions for your API calls for your backend. I've mentioned widgets here again is because when you you want to start being a senior level Flutter developer, it is recommended that you start creating your own widgets. You can start practicing other stuff already packages Flutter.net, which is also I believe there's an issue. Let me. Um, let's talk about what states are and design patterns, and touch upon the expert side of things as well before the time lapses. Anyhow, so states are something. State management is something that to the very day a lot of experts and a lot of senior level of developers face a challenge upon due to the changing nature of the framework itself. But what states are, they help you to create real-time updates on your application, maybe your a responsive or maybe an interactive application. Whenever you click a button or scroll, you require some sort of feedback coming from your application. So those things are actually tackled in this place in your state management, and that is what the question was, if I believe. So can you list some approaches for state management? Yeah. So the approaches for state management are three things which I recommend. Firstly, a very good understanding of what providers are, how async and await works, and a trial and error method for how your user UI responds. Because sometimes whenever you're trying to manage these states, the frames per second of your application reduces. So Flutter comes in with its performance management tool, so you can uh, definitely use these three things as a very beginner to senior level of roles. But down the line, there are other tools as well where you can use for state management. There are block patterns as block builders. There are a lot of different design patterns you can use to state manage your application. So as I said, let's just jump into what design patterns are. So design patterns not just comprises of what your material interface or Cupertino design uh, systems are, but it actually talks about how your entire uh, uh, application development approaches. One of them is one of my current favorite is test-driven design, and it is a scalable design model is something which should firstly put out. And TDD or test-driven design is you never even start writing a code. You plan out your entire application, and then you start writing tests on what the accurate and inaccurate behavior of a particular feature is. And once and only once when those features are done, your partial APIs are also done, your data modeling is done, and then you start getting into the development phase. So yeah, TDD for the win, guys. So couple of app development strategies includes something which, as of now, I would like to give to you guys is following a particular kind of architecture for development, and always sticking to one. And sorry, actually always not just sticking to one, but discovering a lot others. Some of architectures could be your MVV, MVC, MVVM, your clean architecture. So these strategies always help you working with your application developers, with your team, to keep your code clean, to keep your code base clean, and be a lot efficient in your work. Right. So now, when you start coming into the expert phase of your Flutter development, um, oh, that's a very nice question, Saurabh. Let's just answer that first. Is block better or provider? So this question is, again, it boils down to what do you want to do? If you want to create an application on the go, and something like, is if it's some sort of quick fix you want to do, provider is always something which you can use with, which is used with the provider package, and there's a very less boilerplate code over there. You just need to do some sort of wrapping in your main files, and then use a test notifier and those things in your uh, in your application. But on the other hand, block is much more comprehensive, and it comes with a variety of options that you can play with. So when you're trying to create something very scalable, or something which is very which is more complex than just a small application developed in a couple of weeks, block is something which you want to do, because it is not only scalable, but there's a lot of new things, lot of new features that has been introduced in block, such as qubits, and you can use qubits to manage the state. You can emit and create states. So those are pretty senior level things, but they are kind of involved in your state management a lot. So if you would ask me, if I'm making a small application, I would go for providers, and anything else I'll go for block. Let's just quickly go through the expert side of things. Code quality, testing, security. So these three things kind of go hand in hand, because your code quality or your lint issues is basically how well you write the code. Yeah, are commandments, if you remember. And these practices help you write better test cases. So whenever your tester sits down for your mocking your test, or starts doing unit tests or widget tests, they know what is happening when they are doing smoke test, as well as when they are doing like a proper code review test kind of thing. And whatever reports are generated by these tests, or whatever the output of these tests are, help you ensure your security is well maintained, and only things are accessible through a particular flow of data. Right. I'm just quickly going through this, because I believe there's not a lot of audience there here who are not looking for expert side of things. But again, architecture and monitoring, these I'll go through them separately. So architecture is, as I explained earlier, clean architecture is my current favorite. There's a lot of things you can do depending on what your project is. A couple of years ago, MVC was a prime, or the alpha of the architecture scenario, because it was pretty easy. It was easy for new developers. It is still easy for new developers, but the demand in the or the updations in the Flutter environment, or in general the technical environment, are more moving away from those architectures, and they are now shifting towards something like a clean architecture. Again, there are like a group of four architecture and a lot of things that you can do if it's a small application. MVC and GOF is something I recommend for small applications. uh, and distribution strategies. Oh, my bad, I kind of missed on what monitoring is. So monitoring is basically having a look of your application once you've done with it. A couple of resources would definitely be Firebase ka Crashlytics. What your Play Store is. Play Store has its great set of tools for monitoring your application, your KPIs, कितना use हो रहा है, what screen the user is stuck upon. So I would recommend you guys to definitely check out how you can monitor your application while it's in production. I can talk very less about it, because it has this plethora of tools uh, throughout the domain, and People use different tools for different use cases for different marketing strategies, but monitoring your app always helps you to understand, to improve your application, and also you can find these key places where you can market your USP maybe, right? Um, yeah, and distribution strategies is very expert level thing, which I believe a lot of uh, devs don't need to interact with. But if I had to explain it to you guys, it would mean how do you handle flavors in your application. You could introduce a lot of flavors of a particular application in your Play Store, and that would mean it simply has a different APK, or a different package for a particular app of a particular for a particular set of users. If you are running a closed user group and you want them to use a particular APK of the same app that you're trying to make, so these flavors are handled on the Play Store ends and on the App Store ends. So that is another topic that I would recommend you guys to go through, but not do a very much deep dive, because again, you guys probably are like a senior or beginner level devs, and your basics need to be very much strong before you jump into those managing and those product manager kind of role over there, right? So yeah, finally let's just go to the next slide over here. So let's go to back to the basics. I thought I would not spend a lot of time on that previous slide, so I could explain this one. A lot of Flutter questions. So as this is an AMA thing, we'll answer all those questions later on by the end of this session. But yeah, let's just talk about these three things that are there to be um, thought upon by a beginner Flutter dev. So if you are someone who's coming from a background, or someone who's coming from a mobile dev background, I'm sure you must understand how classes work if you have used something like TypeScript, or maybe Java or something like that. But that again has a couple of variances in how the controls, how the variables work, how those oops concept can be used over here. A different set of semantics for sure. But as I said earlier on, Dart ensures that both the best qualities in terms of semantics is picked from both JavaScript kind of language and something like C++ or Java. So even even if you're someone who is very fresh to the development scene, if this is your second or third language to learn, I would recommend you guys go through all those key buzzwords or key practices that you do in any other language. However, if you're someone who's just starting off dev, I'll recommend you start learning something very basic like C++ maybe, because it helps you understand oops concept and classes and functions and variables in more easier way, or maybe actually in something more difficult way, so that when you come to Dart you feel like अरे मैंने तो इतना पत्थर तोड़ा. Over here it's just everything's happening on its own and everything is much more smoother. So yeah, always have your oops concept clear to start any other language or any other framework. And when you do that, just take a quick dip in what these controls or what these differences are in that language and yours. So I've talked a lot about the second point already, what widgets are and what these states are. So states are again different types of variables and uh, sorry, I kind of digress. But what let's just talk firstly about what widgets are. So everything over here is a widget inside the application, and if you're someone who's been using uh, like a Android development, you're from an Android development background, you need to create like an XML file. You need to create like a bunch of model classes, a bunch of boilerplate code for your Java, right? And then only then you can actually start coding your uh, mm, application. But over here, when you start coding, I'll share the code base in a couple of minutes. You start right away from the root widget or the screen itself. and then you start adding components such as app bar, the body, the buttons, and so on. So all these classes are actually widgets, and uh, yeah, so everything from to your root of the screen to the button to the text uh, to your to the image, everything is a widget over here. And there are a bunch of different type of widgets to which I would to which you would firstly interact with are stateful and stateless widgets. So these are a stateless widget is something that stays like that throughout the journey of an application or throughout until the memory is being cleared. But a stateful widget is something which is more dynamic and updates throughout the whenever it is interacted with or whenever something happens in an application. So that's the crux of what a different kind of states are in a widget. A good example for a stateless widget could be a simple text label. A good example for a stateful widget could be a carousel of some sort, or maybe different kinds of tabs that you click and an animation happens over there, right? I'm sorry if I'm rushing to the third point over here because this is something I mean, the former two can be googled very easily. The later ones are kind of mm, very specific. So we'll slow down over here and talk aram se. Uh, so let's talk about what material versus Cupertino is. Now, as Flutter is developed by Google, this is something very monopoly thing that they did, that they shipped it right away with the material design. And to ऐसा Apple का दिल रखने के लिए, they also created a package for Cupertino. Cupertino is basically the design system that Apple uses, and material design system तो पता ही होगा अपने को. So how do you decide what design system or what package you want to use, or what classes you want to use, how your button should feel? So if you're a web developer, material design system and Cupertino design system are your bootstrap equivalent for or like a CSS for Apple and Apple and Android phones, right? So how do you decide which one do you take first? So literally all the major classes and all the major design elements are based off material. However, like a bunch of different things, like maybe a switch that Apple has a very fat switch, if you know what I mean. It has a different way of app bar. So these couple of things are uniquely designed for Apple, and those are present in the Cupertino library. So how I look at is, firstly I see if we have a design for our application. पहले तो उससे stick करो. Don't think about what package you're using until जब तक तुम्हारा design or whatever the design your developer has made is satisfied. It doesn't matter what you use, because both of these design systems work irrespective of whatever operating system the app is working on, right? But if there is like an ऐसा thumb rule कि हम लोग को सिर्फ Android के लिए बनाना है and we want to use only material applications, or we want to only design and develop for Apple and we only want to use Cupertino. In those cases, yeah, it's okay to ऐसा मांडवली करके we can use only material or only Cupertino. Right. And yeah, so in the same point, like that is the UI tackled. The other one, which is a middle ground for backend and UI, is how do you handle your navigation, which is passing data between the between the screens, and how do you handle your networking. Networking basically means API calls. So that is one question which was asked, and now I'm answering that. So firstly, let's talk about navigation. So uh, I have a background of what Android development is, and I've been working for in Android development for roughly about like 4 years or so. So over there, we used to handle things with intents, probably probably use shared preferences and so an equivalent of intent over here is already present, and also an equivalent, actually a package for shared preference is already present over here. So if you are someone who knows what those things are, great, तुम वो इधर reuse कर सकते हो. But apart from that, while you're navigating, sometimes you would prefer uh, not to simply pass the data like that, but store it locally and then handle things over the next page. So in that cases, there are a lot of packages. A couple of ones that I would recommend is to use is Hive. Hive is actually your JSON based uh, database which you can locally create and store. They 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 work very similar to shared preferences, but it has a very better way of mapping data, and it deals with your big data models very nicely. It's purely map based database, uh, but it is way more better and advanced than shared preference. The other one, again, if your application is a bit smaller, if you have a smaller team and you guys are called out to put less effort because time and all those constraints, you can definitely use something like shared preference, right? And finally, let's come to the testing kind of phase over here, what mock, unit, and widget test means. A quick glance. Mock tests are basically to understand if the data type you are expecting in your widget is correct or not. Those are mock tests. Uh, I'll not take a very deep dive to it because beginner devs are not recommended to do those things. I'll just let you know what those things are so that you'll be prepared if they are thrown at you. And then will say, "Hey, we don't do this." So yeah, that's mock test. Unit testing is again understanding how your particular feature or particular button works, and doing tests on if on expect, verify, and when clauses, meaning when a certain behavior is put into that button, you should be expecting a certain kind of response. So that is the unit test that you do. And finally, coming to the what is even Firebase? I mean, so that is a whole topic, a whole talk, a whole session on itself. Firebase has been here. Firebase is basically a technology, a toolkit, or a stack that's been here for the past 6 years or so. I've been using Firebase for the before it was even acquired by Google, and right now it's subdomain of Google where a toolkit by the Google where application where app developers can come in and start using a lot of different products such as authentications, databases, storages, crash analytics, and a lot, like it's a plethora of different products provided by Google. And for me, if I had to recommend someone who is a mobile dev who is going to start off with the with the development scene, and it's just one person making an application and doesn't want to get involved into learning another framework for backend, the databases, and all that chaos, Firebase is your solution. That is all I would say right now, because I could go on and on about that, and this session would never end, right? So Jay, let's go to the next session, the next slide. I mean, so let's do some demo. So Sweets by Roshan is my Instagram handle for, or GitHub handle for open source codes which I've posted. Uh, I tend to release these code bases for helping beginner devs to understand how all you can what all you can do with Flutter, create interactive user designs and post it online, create maybe a bunch of boilerplate for networking code and post it online, and it's freely available on GitHub. But that's not what this meant. What we will be doing now is I'll be sharing my screen in a bit, and I'll demo you guys through a bunch of code base over here, right? Yeah. So the first question was asked like a couple 20 minutes ago by Kavya was how do you handle JSON serialization in Flutter? Again, it comes to the size of the project, but the two ways that I could recommend is firstly, if it's a small project, small size, small scale of project, you can handle it manually, and there are keywords which you can use to predict a certain type of data to be received from the backend, called as keyword. However, if your project is a bit more bigger, and it's bigger than your regular small projects, you can. My recommendation would be using the JSON serializable package. I believe it is spelled as JSON underscore serializable in the pub.dev package repositories. Reason being because I guess again fanboy stuff. I've been using that library for like past 5 months or so, and as it is it's also favorited by the Flutter community, and it has very nice points in the pubdev package repository altogether. Is That is why I would recommend using that. Yeah. What approach for building responsive layouts in Flutter? Okay, so I believe this is a question for the web side of things, right? So yeah, I guess this package called responsive layout or responsive builder, which you can use, which helps you create callback functions for your mobile, web, and a desktop screen. Actually, not callback functions, but they have that builder altogether has a uh, attribute set of these three, and you can pass on a set of widgets or your layouts in those three those three constructor parameters, and handle your responsiveness in Flutter. So that is a bit senior level question, and if you or maybe something very something that a new web Flutter developer would ask. But yeah, you can use the responsive layout package again from pub.dev, where you can handle those things. Um, right. How do API calls work in Flutter? Okay. So we use the HTTP package again. So in Flutter, just a quick note, a lot of things are built in with the Flutter SDK. A bunch of things are adapted by packages created by the community or by the devs like you guys. So we can use the HTTP package over here, which you need to again refer to pub.dev, and using that you can handle your API calls, and all of those things come under the stream or the block or provider segment of Flutter. Right. Can you explain null safety? Right. So this is a concept which was recently put out by in the Flutter 2 event, which happened, I believe, in May or March, something like that. However, so null safety was very new, and this resolved a lot of issues which was happening while passing your data or doing some sort of JSON serialization. So what happens is uh, at the whenever you're trying to, so there are whenever you're trying to handle your null values in your database in your application, you can simply use this null safety, which is I believe in available in the Flutter 2.0 SDK, and for that you need to use a particular uh, what's the right word I'm looking for? Um, uh, let me Google that word for you folks. This is the prime the second thing you do a lot as a developer. Google things correctly. So the word that I was looking for was actually where is it? hmm Yeah, I'll get back to that question if that's okay, because I'm not able to think of that. I know what you want to do. I know what the answer, but for some reason it's not being it's not popped up in my head. So yeah, whatever that to handle these nullable types, you simply add a question mark to your data type. Let's say if it's a string called name. So while you're instantiating or interacting with that string variable, you type it like string question mark and the variable name. I'm not able to recall what that question mark or that particular site is called in Dart or maybe uh, in Flutter, but you simply slap that with your data type or the class name, and you can handle your null values over there. So what that does is it checks uh, if it requires some sort of null safety, or if you are trying to do an unsound null safety. So what it directly returns you the value if it is a nullable type, or if it is actually of whatever the type you're passing. So we'll be demoing this application now, or how should I put it? So this app is basically whatever you um, type over here. Let's say rice, and this is something which I just created for this entire session over here. So whenever you search for rice and you click OK, it gives you a list of recipes you can create from that particular uh, set of ingredients you have, right? So let's try to manipulate this interface and understand how easy it is to code in Flutter. So over here, please don't mind the lack of discipline that I've been talking about for the past one and a half hour, because this is a code base that was created by me a year ago, so I was not very smart then. So yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of things inside other things and back and forth. So this is simply how a Flutter application looks like while you're coding it, things inside things and so on, right? I'll not try to get you overwhelmed by explaining every line of code, but rather what we can do over here is uh, we can show how easy it is to make these edits inside a particular page. So I hope this was not very boring for you folks, because I've been talking a lot, and uh, coding is something which you can understand once you start actually getting into it and not simply speaking about it a lot. Right. So this is what it looks like. Uh, the body has a scrollable area, it has a container, it has columns, and then so on. So inside these columns are a bunch of things like this padding, which has some sort of icon, and then there is a text box. So let's work here, folks. So we do this over here, and save this. Some magic happens over there, and the execution happens very much. I know if you are a mobile developer, this might seem like a problem for you, which is actually it. And thanks, man. So yeah, so this is how a lot of refactoring can be done. So another way you can handle text in Flutter is something which I would want to show you, is using these set of alphabets or characters over here. So what will happen is it will take care of whatever recipe or the label is of the recipe. And once you get into that particular recipe, hello code green essential rice. So this is something for a developer point of view, it is very interesting, because if you can see, it is not only identifying the value over here, but it is handling that on the go inside the uh, parameter itself. You don't need to create a separate variable to handle that, or you need not need to concatenate the two separate strings. It's handling that all on its own. Let's just try to play with the colors a bit over here. Yeah, let's try to do some sort of cancerous colors that can burn your eyes. We'll put red over here just to see how it feels. See, you have something done right over there. A simple line of code can, like a single line of code can help you implement big changes throughout your application. So yeah, this is a bit of if you want to know more about this these stuffs that are happening over here, you can surely check out the GitHub page that Jay had mentioned over this, Sweets by Roshan. Um, I'll just give you a quick glance of I what you might find over there. These are different packages and different projects that you can look into to understand various things you can have for various stuff you can do in Flutter. So these are a bunch of it. I've created like a entire design system on its own. This is what we are working. This is what we were demoing currently. And yeah, folks, that would be that would be it. I don't want to overwhelm you guys with a lot of code thrown right in your way. As this is an introductory session, I would like to keep it that way and not mess with your head by overwhelming you guys. But if there are any questions, any other questions than the previous one, we can surely tackle them now if in the session's end. So, folks, that is the end. If you want my GitHub link, that's the yeah. Thanks, man. You can visit that. You can check out the entire repository of things. Shubham says he doesn't approve cancerous colors. I'm so sorry about that, man. And if you have any other questions for me, feel free to ask that.